Today we're going to talk about how to ride your motorcycle in the rain. Do you think that's dangerous? We're going to make it safer. I've got 7 tips that are going to keep you alive so you can ride all year round. Unless it snows where you live, I'd probably stay home and make a snowman. No, I'd get one of those snowmobile things. So yesterday I went for a ride with some local hog members. It was a bitterly cold Melbourne day, on and off rain all day. And it got me thinking, how lucky am I to be able to ride all year round? Because a lot of people balk at riding as soon as the weather gets nasty and the rain sets in. Their fear meter creeps in as soon as it starts to rain. It stops them riding. So I thought I'd do a video on some tips that will keep you safe and get you home alive. There are certain things that you should and shouldn't do, but on the whole, it's not too bad if you're set up correctly. Now look at the Grand Prix motorcycle races. They're seriously quick compared to us, but they're still quick even when it rains. So I really think that some riders don't understand or appreciate how much grip you actually have in the wet. It's probably much more than you think. And of course, riding in the wet means you've got to be extra cautious and you've got to adjust your riding technique. But that's easy to do. Now, when it's raining, no matter how bad the conditions get, the first tip and the last tip override everything. They bring it all together and you can't miss either of these tips if you want to ride safely in the rain. Now, number 1 is smooth. You've got to be smooth with all of your inputs. So in other words, you've got to avoid sudden throttle, brake and steering input moves, because it's these sudden movements that are going to cause loss of traction. And when it comes to braking, you're going to have to increase your braking distance and you're going to have to apply your front and rear brakes gently, progressively and smoothly. And really it's the increased braking distance that you allow between cars, that's cars in front of you and behind you, that are going to help you be smooth. Because usually when the road's wet, you're going to have reduced traction for your tyres, so you really do need to allow extra distances to stop. Otherwise, that progressive, smooth braking action is not going to happen. You're going to go whack, and that's not a good thing for your traction. If you don't have ABS on your motorcycle, and most modern motorcycles do, you're going to have to use the rear brake a little bit more in proportion to the front brake than you normally would. It's the rear brake that helps stabilize the motorcycle. If you lose traction, it's much easier to control your motorcycle if the traction's lost on the rear wheel rather than the front. So when you're braking, initially do this a little bit slower so that you load up the suspension and the front tyre. That's going to help you get traction, and then do the aggressive part of the braking later on in the movement. It's a subtle difference, but it helps with traction. And smooth applies to acceleration as well. A lot of people really jerk on the throttle, especially coming out of corners. You don't want to do that. You want to do all of your movements slow. Same thing happens with your steering inputs. If you're going to counter steer, don't do it so aggressively. Just aim for smooth movements everywhere, especially if the bike isn't straight. And that's what smooth is all about. Have a think about your suspension as well. I don't really know how much of this is going to matter for the average rider on the road in the wet, but I do know that the motorcycle Grand Prix guys will adjust their suspension so that it's a lot softer when it's raining and wet on the track. Whenever I've had standard Harley-Davidson suspension, I know that I have to compensate for its inadequacies. I turn it up to make it really stiff. So when you're riding, that's going to accentuate any movements that you have. I've got some awesome Wilbur's suspension now, so it's not really an issue. Hi, my name's Eamon and welcome to the channel. If you like what I'm doing with these videos, consider helping. Tell a friend about this channel or about our fantastic Facebook group. Check out the website oldnotdead.club. Grab yourself, or for a loved one, some awesome supporter gear. Grab yourself a hoodie, a t-shirt, a patch, a sticker, a beanie, a cap. We've got everything but the kitchen sink. Middle of winter, freezing cold, let's go for a ride. It's been raining all morning, the sun's just come out. We're gonna meet some people down the road and go for a ride. Should be good. What do you want to say, Sarah?
Where there's sunshine, there is rain. Where there are faces.
Sunday morning ride, we started, it was sunny, we're half an hour in and the sky looks fantastic. Got the wet weather gear on. Sarah's trying to dress herself. Eric's got the wet weather pants on.
Yep.
Wes has got the sophisticated gear on.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. Nice and warm.
Yep.
Nice and warm.
Light them fires, run with the gangsters, taste the forbidden fruits. We love to run. We know how to be a hot mess, hot mess. All the places we have crashed. We
Absolutely freezing.
Nice and warm. Keeping your ears crisp.
be a mess. Crush the glass walls. We'll have a ball. Force the people to eat out of your hand. Kill the illusion and watch the
Check this out, the bravest person on the ride is my wife Sarah, because she's just snaffled the rhino all by herself. Everyone else is running away, looking scared.
And we know how to be a hot mess, hot mess. All the places we have crashed.
Number 2, very important, manage your traction. So it's pretty obvious that the biggest problem we have in the rain is less traction. So the worst time for traction is when it first starts to rain. You've got whatever was on the road in the first place, whether that be oil or whatever debris is there, plus you've got the water mixed with that. When it first starts raining, all this goop gets washed sort of all over the road before it gets a chance to be washed away. So that's the worst time. After it's been raining for a while, maybe a couple of hours, the road is usually in a lot better condition, because then you've just got water to deal with. And often the wet asphalt has a lot of grip. It's the additions to the road that cause us all the problems. Think about white lines, manhole covers, lawn clippings, leaves over the road. All of these things, when they get wet, become a much greater hazard than they already are. Here in Melbourne, if you're going closer to the city, we've got a lot of tram tracks all over the road to deal with. When they get wet, they're very slippery. But again, it really depends on how aggressive you are when you're riding in the wet. Sometimes your rear wheel will slip a little bit around a corner if it hits a white line. But as soon as you cross that white line or whatever you're slipping on and hit the road again, you'll get grip. And if you haven't been too aggressive, it's not really a problem. So a little bit of a skid here and there often doesn't matter. It might make a boring ride more interesting. Another thing to consider in regard to traction is, where are you positioned on the road? Often when it's raining, especially when it's raining heavily, if you position yourself and ride where the car tyres are, that's often the driest part of the road, because the tyres of the cars in front of you have already dispersed the water from the road. It's good positioning. And that brings up the subject of aquaplaning, or hydroplaning, some people call it. In the wet, you really want to position your bike at the driest part of the road. So you might have to wander around the road a bit looking for the driest patches. What you want to avoid is pools of water or puddles, because the grooves in your tyres are there to remove the water that is sandwiched between the road and your tyre as you're riding along. So if you hit a patch where there's too much water, your tyre won't have the ability to remove that water, and that's where you're going to lose traction. Now, I don't know if a motorcycle can actually aquaplane. I had a car once that had very wide rear tyres. I probably should have changed them a little bit earlier. They were getting worn. It was a very powerful car with an engine in the middle instead of at the front. It was a wet day. I was going up an incline. I didn't think I was going that fast. I was accelerating, and the wide tyres started to aquaplane. There was water over the road. The wide tyres started to aquaplane. Because the engine's in the middle of the car, it became a spinning top going down the street. It wasn't such a serious experience, it would have been a lot of fun. But that's a car with really wide tyres. I think on a motorcycle, you're just going to fall down. And that brings me to software. A lot of modern bikes, in order to maintain traction, because they're getting more and more powerful, they've got rain mode, they've got traction control, and with a flick of a button, you can make adjustments to your motorcycle, which will soften the throttle input, or allow the computer in the motorcycle to understand when traction is being lost and make the appropriate adjustments. It does work well. I've used it many times on the bikes I've owned. And just in general, a less sensitive throttle response on a motorcycle makes it much easier to ride. Now, of course, you don't want to get complacent just because you've got a computer that's doing a lot of the work for you. The technology is getting better and better every year, but you'd still want to be thinking about what you're doing. Now, number 3 is cornering. I'd be approaching corners at a slower speed when it's wet, and I'd be looking to take a wider line so that I don't have to lean as much. This is where steering inputs come in. If you can flick your bike through a corner, I wouldn't be doing that as quick. I'd be looking for very gentle movements. Lean your bike gradually. Take the corner slower so that there is an absolute guarantee you're not going to have to change lean angles mid-corner. Now remember, when you're going through a corner, if you lean your body, that means the bike doesn't have to lean as far, which is going to keep you more upright. You're going to look stupid leaning your body and going so slow, but it'll be raining, no one's watching. When you're exiting the corner, I'd be waiting a little bit longer before I start to accelerate, in particular if you're going faster. Get the bike more upright and then accelerate. Now, number 4 is visibility. Make sure that you can be seen, but also make sure that you can see. Because when it's wet and raining, it usually gets a lot darker. I know when I was riding yesterday, I had a tinted visor on, a very dark tinted visor, and it does reduce your visibility. When it's raining, it's a lot harder to see potholes on the road. It's a lot harder to see what's actually happening in front of you. So if you're going to ride in the rain regularly, I'd be making sure I've got a pretty decent headlight. I don't think I've ever seen rain gear that doesn't have some sort of reflective material on it somewhere, even if it's just a little bit. You might want to consider high vis gear, even if you're riding a Harley. Now, if we're talking visibility, don't forget it's the drivers on the road that have less visibility as well. So you really have to keep your wits about you and make the assumption that you're going to be seen a lot less than you normally are. And if we're talking about other drivers, don't forget they might not compensate as much as you do for the wet conditions. Now that means you're going to have to adjust your driving to keep away from them if they're not slowing down or if they're not taking into account different braking conditions. We can only really control ourselves. So I've been in situations where I've thought, yeah, I really need to slow down, but let's say you're on the freeway and the other cars around you don't. You're going to put yourself in an awkward position where there's less visibility, it's wet, you're on a freeway and there are cars bearing down at you. So you might not be able to slow down. Now, number 5, that brings us to tyre pressure and tread. Now, for maximum traction, you've got to have the right tyre pressure. If you have too little air in your tyres or too much air, you're going to reduce the contact patch with the road. You need the right amount of air in your tyre. All you've got to do is pull out the owner's manual. It'll tell you what pressure is required. Buy yourself an accurate tyre gauge. It does make a difference. I've tested the pumps at service stations before. They are way out and you don't really know what you're getting. So it's a good idea to make sure you get it right. In the dry, as the tread wears down on your tyres, they're still going to be quite grippy. I don't know where the tipping point is, but they don't sort of work like slicks. At some stage, when the tread is really low, they sort of give way. You'd think it would be like, oh, now I've got slicks. How cool is that? It doesn't seem to work that way. Probably because the tyres aren't made for that. But don't be fooled, because as that tyre tread gets worn down, as there's less depth in the grooves, your tyres won't be able to remove the water from the road, because that's how you maintain traction. Your tyre comes into contact with the road, and the grooves that are cut into your tyre, the grooves disperse the water so that the contact patch hits the road. Shallower grooves is not a good thing. Less water can be dispersed. Now, of course, that's going to depend on how much water is on the road, but why would you risk it? Of course, there are different tyres to consider. It's a good idea when you're buying tyres to buy those that are appropriate for your bike. Touring tyres are often designed in a way, I don't know, I think they put more silica in them, but they're often designed in a way to give you increased traction in the wet. I guess that's obvious because, you know, if you've got a touring bike, they're assuming that you're going to be riding from here to Kingdom Come, and it's probably going to rain at some stage. And I know from having tested different tyres and brands, some handle the wet a lot better than others. Do your research. Number 6 is clothing. It's usually cold when it rains, or it is here because we get most of our rain in winter. Make sure you've got the appropriate clothing. It's not difficult. There are so many choices. It's really easy. It's pretty easy on a touring bike because I've got plenty of room to carry things. I've always got a rain jacket and pants that I throw into the saddlebags. Starts raining, stop, put them on. It's a no-brainer. It also works well when it gets really cold. Throw the plastic clothing over the top. It does actually keep you warm if the wind is a little bit too cold. There are all sorts of fantastic jackets and pants that have Gore-Tex liners. I was wearing one yesterday. Super warm, super dry, you can't beat it. Much better than the plastic gear that you throw over the top of your leather jacket. Clothing's a major consideration because when you get cold on a motorcycle, you start to tense up and you can't really ride properly. Now this is even worse when it's wet because one of the worst things you can do is to be tense. So you really need to make sure you don't get cold. If you get wet, it's likely that you're going to get cold. So think carefully about the gear that you purchase, think carefully about the gear that you take with you, in particular if you're going out for a long time or for multiple days. And the tech on motorcycle clothing is fantastic now. It breathes, you don't get sweaty in it anymore. When I first started riding motorcycles, it was like all you could get was yellow plastic pants that you put over the top. And if you're lucky, here in Melbourne, you could find a yellow plastic jacket to stick over your leather jacket. You would be a ball of sweat within 30 seconds. It made the riding experience horrible. Worst case scenario, if you get stuck somewhere and you think it's going to start to pour, just go to a supermarket or to some shops and look for plastic bags. A bin liner with 3 holes poked through it over the top works wonders. Plastic bags on gloves and feet. Plastic bags work really well. I used to do that a lot when I was younger before I could afford decent motorcycle clothing. They keep you dry, they keep you warm, they just disintegrate at high speed and they're one use only. Now number 7, very important, you've got to stay relaxed on your motorcycle. When you're relaxed, you've got much greater control of your motorcycle. Tension on a motorcycle is what destroys all of those smooth inputs. But tension also binds up your mind, and you want to have your wits about you when you're riding in the rain. And as soon as it starts raining, people start to get scared, and that creates tension. And it really requires mental discipline to force yourself to relax. In order to understand that you have increased tension when you're riding, you need to be able to internally scan yourself, that's physically and mentally, because you can have tension in both regards. And if you discover that you're being tense, you need to do something to physically relax your body, and that requires you to mentally command certain sections or muscles of your body to relax. It can be done quite easily, but you've got to be aware of it. A lot of people tense up and are not relaxed when they're riding because they're not really trusting that their bike will do its job. But your bike's quite capable of riding and turning corners in the rain. It's designed that way. If you actually deliberately go for a short ride in the rain on a nice Sunday afternoon and practice, when you get caught in the rain in a situation that is, let's say you're on a longer trip or something, or the traffic's heavier, or there's more pressure on you for whatever reason, you're going to be a lot more relaxed and you're going to be more used to that type of situation. That's how you get relaxed. Practice makes a big difference on any topic. Now, another way to stay relaxed is to willfully practice patience. Starts to pour, you think, I'd better hurry home. That lack of patience or that extra pace that you think you need is potentially going to make you tense up as you try and hurry. So patience is the key in the rain. Smooth is the key in the rain. Don't be scared of it. It's actually a lot of fun. It can actually be a fun, almost meditative experience riding in the rain. I like to get all rugged up in my rain gear, full face helmet on. Sort of feels like you're in a cocoon. It can be quite enjoyable when there's no pressure. So follow the tips, adapt your riding style, have some patience, and you'll find that riding in the rain or in the wet can be a lot of fun. And it's going to extend your riding season. If you like today's video, you're going to love the video that I'm going to link here.
Using all that's left, somewhere in your chest, on your sweetheart hit a mist. Oh, oh.